Welcome back to the Delaware Way. Delaware is home to one of the top watchmaking schools in the world and one of only a handful in the country, but it has a special mission. Sam Cannan is chairman of the Veterans Watchmakers Initiative. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
So what is the Veterans Watchmakers Initiative?
The Veterans Watchmaker Initiative is the only technical school exclusively in the United States for disabled veterans. That's the only people we take. They attend the school, which is 2,235 hours, which is Master Watchmaker level training, and they attend absolutely free.
Wow, and how can you afford to allow them to come absolutely free?
Well, I'm a retired Baltimore cop that got into watchmaking early. I've got 30 years in this field, and I'm trained as an instructor in Switzerland. And watchmaking has been very good to me. And I have a home here in Delaware, and I have one in Pennsylvania. And it was my goal and desire 8 years ago to start this project.
And Newcastle County helped you?
Yes, it did.
How so?
Tom Gordon, who was the executive at the time, liked my proposal of taking a retired EMT station in Odessa, Delaware, and was boarded up and scheduled to be torn down and turning it into a school for disabled veterans.
But getting a boarded up station and turning it into a watch school takes a lot more than just being given the land and the property.
It's true. It took a year.
And how did you get the money for that?
Well, we had money put aside for that from donations and things because we're privately funded. And I did most of the work, and I had help from the Hogs and Heroes Foundation and Mike Whiff specifically from Middletown, who is the president of Delaware 4. Those guys stepped up and they have helped renovate that building. And they were standing right next to me 9/12 when we had the grand opening.
I think some people think of watchmakers as being like next to the cobbler shop and being an old-time profession that maybe isn't in vogue anymore.
Well, there's nothing could be further from the truth about that. Year over year, based on the Federation of the Swiss Watch Industry statistics, 27% increase year over year in luxury watch sales, all mechanicals, with China and Japan being 1 and 2 and the United States being number 3.
Even with the iPhones, even with the smartphones?
Well, you know, you have the president of the company who has a $1,000 iPhone, but he has a $30,000 Rolex on his wrist that he's not going to throw away. So I know function's a big part of it, and I'm never going to say it's not, but is it as much the aesthetics of it and the fact that it's jewelry? Well, for me, not so much. Watches are, as far as I equate them, to be living things. When you're so intimate with something the size of a quarter and it's only you and it, and you're disassembling this thing that hasn't worked for 30 years, that is a monument to somebody's event in their life, and you hand it back to them running, it's amazing, the transformation, the tears in their eyes. One gentleman in particular, I did an Accutron for him who was shot down in Vietnam in a fire. And multiple watchmakers said it couldn't be repaired. So I said, I'll fix it for you. He said, well, please don't do anything to the dial and hands because it was in the fire. And he actually wept when I returned the watch to him. It meant that much to him.
Oh, that's amazing. And what does it mean to the men who are showing up, men and women, I would think, that are showing up to make these watches?
Well, here's a good example. We have one kid who was seriously wounded, Army. Didn't know if he could do this or even wanted to go. Now, 14 months later, he's been approached by the most famous jewelry store in America and is being offered essentially a 6-figure salary and 6 weeks in Switzerland to train for one of the most prestigious watch brands in the world.
And is that the best story, or is that a common story?
That's pretty much a common story.
And how many people have been through your school so far?
Well, in this new school, it's been 6, but we have over 400 waiting.
And how many can you take at a time? Is it 6?
Well, we received a grant to expand part of the garage area. Once we finish the expansion, which is in the process right now, in the back classroom area, we'll be the biggest watch school in the world, or in the USA, at 22 students.
And you told me there's only 4, right?
There's 6.
There's 6 watch schools in the United States right now? Mm-hmm. And in the East Coast?
Well, one on the East Coast, and the rest are out west and on the West Coast. 2 in Texas.
And the demand for watchmakers, you said a jewelry store, and I would imagine that there's some huge brands like Bulova and many others that have watchmakers. But are there people that make watches like individually? You can go to them and say, "I'll make you a watch."
My students are required to build a watch from scratch in the class.
And where does that go?
It goes on their wrist at the end of the class.
That's what I thought you were going to say.
But think about that. You take a kid who has been seriously hurt and thrown away, basically. All the dignity has been stripped from him. You give him a career that no one can take away from him, no matter what his disability is. And he can make six figures and go anywhere in the world and do it. Can you imagine the change? And I see it in 10, 12, 15 weeks in the training. What happens with these kids? They realize that all of a sudden, they can be in control of their own lives again. And that's amazing to me.
How do people find out more about your place, either if they want to donate or if they know somebody that wants to get on your waiting list?
Just go to the website at www.vwmi.org. And we're a 501c3 charitable organization, and all donations are tax deductible.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for coming in. It was a pleasure meeting you.
Thank you.
Sam Cannan is the chairman of the Veterans Watchmaker Initiative in Odessa. When we come back, we will introduce you to one of the top-rated small businesses in Delaware. They have an award to prove it. We'll explain when the Delaware Way continues.